President Trump has ordered federal departments to move forward with plans to construct or extend existing parts of the border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. That could have a significant impact on businesses and families in the southern communities in our state. Here at New Mexico in Focus, we continue to closely follow how changes in immigration policy and the border wall are impacting people. But this week, we take a look at animals and wildlife in the region. Correspondent Laura Pasca sat down with two environmental advocates to talk about how a wall along rugged parts of the border in New Mexico and Arizona might impact wildlife and New Mexicans who enjoy recreation and hunting in that area.
I'm joined in the studio by Garrett Veneklausen, Executive Director of New Mexico Wildlife Federation, and Brian Bird, Southwest Director of Defenders of Wildlife. Thank you both for being here today. I wanted to start with you, Garrett. You helped organize a coalition of partners around the state to sign on to a letter to Governor Martinez regarding the border wall and wildlife. What did you have in that letter? What did you want the governor to do?
So I think it's first important to clarify that the force behind this is Gabe Vasquez, who is our Southern Field Coordinator. And he has started this coalition called Nuestra Tierra, which is a Latino and Hispanic coalition of interests. And he felt it was really important that we did this. And so I really want to give credit where credit is due. So I wanted to give Gabe a shout out. But the idea of this is obviously there are incredible environmental and wildlife impacts to this issue. But we all talked this over within our staff and within our board and felt that it was important not only to talk about the wildlife impacts, but also the human impacts and the economic impacts. And I think it's important, I think it's a mistake to silo environmental justice away from social justice and from economics. I think we need to talk about all of them together. So the idea was to get as broad of a coalition of people to address the issue as possible. And so there's faith groups, there's business groups. It's a really broad group of signers, sportsmen, environmental organizations. And it was really exciting to bring people around kind of these common core values of land use and wildlife use, but also include a really strong statement on social justice related to this actual issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Brian, many New Mexicans probably haven't spent a lot of time down in these remote areas that we're talking about. What would people be surprised to find down there right now?
Well, we're very lucky in New Mexico to have some of the country along the borderlands. It's some of the most biodiverse country in North America, and people don't often think of it as being our connection to the south of the border and the animals that live south of the border that cross that border back and forth to the United States. And so some of the species that people don't typically think of are things like jaguars and Mexican wolves. There are parrots that cross the border. There are a lot of species that people don't often think of that we have in the United States, and they need that free access back and forth across the border to remain viable.
Mm-hmm. Garrett, you often advocate for protection of wildlife and the environment so that people can continue to hunt and to fish in these areas. What opportunities might be impacted along the border if there is construction of this more substantial border wall or fence?
So my very favorite place to hunt in all of the Southwest is the Boot Heel. Mm-hmm. There's a species of white-tailed deer, a native species of white-tailed deer called a Coues deer. And that is the stronghold of Coues deer. That is their furthest north range. They're in the Boot Heel and in Arizona. Desert bighorn sheep are also a species that exists down there, and they do cross the border quite a bit. So there's mule deer, there's desert bighorns, there's javelina. There are species of ground game birds. Mearns quail, for example, is a very unique species of a quail that exists in that region. And so all those different species, they depend on being able to move around. And it's a very harsh desert environment. And so the ability for these animals to be able to move, depending upon the conditions of the landscape, we will see incredible impacts to those species, not only the predators, but the ungulates and the game species that are very diverse down there and very, very important and iconic to New Mexico almost exclusively. So.
Okay. You mentioned the jaguar and the Mexican gray wolf. What are your other sort of main concerns right now in southern New Mexico and southern Arizona?
Well, and so it's a very unique area. In fact, it's a focal area for Defenders of Wildlife, and some of our most important and iconic wildlife that we work on live in that area. We call it the Sky Islands region, and it crosses all three borders of New Mexico, Arizona, and Mexico. And in that region, in the Sky Islands, it's some of the most biodiverse in North America. 7,000 species have been known to inhabit the Sky Islands inside the United States. And so we're very concerned about all of the different wildlife, but especially some of those more iconic ones that do move regularly back and forth across the border.
And so the idea of a more substantial border wall isn't really a new idea. What's changed in the federal government in recent decades that makes this sort of a bigger deal right now?
Well, back in the 90s, the federal government really started investing in border security, especially over in California around San Diego and Tijuana. But as they invested in those places, like the major metropolitan areas on the border, it had sort of a balloon effect. When you squeeze it there, the traffic, the human traffic, moved into some of the more wild parts of Arizona and New Mexico. And so they've sort of just changed the problem or moved the problem, and unfortunately it's hitting some of our more wild places in the United States, some of our parklands, our monuments, tribal lands, and communities that have lived peacefully together as families, as Garrett mentioned, for many generations. So it's moved the problem, and now with the new administration, they're talking about putting in infrastructure, impermeable walls and fences in places that we currently don't have them.
Garrett, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, every year I go down for a couple weeks every year and hunt right on the border, and we hunt south of Hachita. And we are seeing more and more traffic across those areas. And again, I think there are much smarter and fiscally smarter ways to address this problem than putting a big barrier there.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And we know that really the only thing that this thing is going to stop is wildlife. It's not going to stop. People are very resourceful, and when you want to do something, it's easy to figure it out. So it doesn't make sense on so many levels.
Right. What about water? If this border wall is constructed, how is that going to affect water resources?
Great question. Most people think of this area as very arid, but there's actually some really beautiful river systems that cross the international border. Two of them flow northward into Arizona from Mexico, the San Pedro and the Santa Cruz. And there's a national wildlife refuge along the international border right near the New Mexico state line called San Bernardino. And these are incredibly important hydrologic systems with fish that are currently endangered or threatened by the federal government. They're listed as endangered or threatened, and they move back and forth just as any other animal does across the state line. And the hydrology is affected. When you place any kind of barrier along the hydrology, you're going to have unnatural flooding and hydrological events that have resulted in loss of life and loss of other resources. So it's as important as any other issue down there.
Okay. So we're talking about the border. What would you say to people who live in Albuquerque or Santa Fe or northern New Mexico about why this is an important issue?
Well, I mean, again, I think, it is the most critical wildlife corridor in North America. And it has such great value for economic reasons. I mean, the outdoor recreation economics in New Mexico is a $6 billion industry. People from around the world want to come see our special, very special wildlife and landscape resources. I think for economic reasons, all New Mexicans should care about economic diversity. They should care about this amazing landscape and the value of it for future economic reasons. There's so many reasons that New Mexicans, and these are public lands. That's another thing. These belong not only equally to all New Mexicans, but all Americans. And most of these lands are public lands, and they belong to everyone, and especially they belong to future generations of people.
Right.
So I think we need to be really careful about these decisions and how we make them, because they're going to impact the future of New Mexico in such a profound way. So,
Brian, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, again, I'll go back to the fact that we have such amazing, unique biota down there that are not found anywhere else in North America. And most Americans don't even know they exist in the United States, like the jaguar. And if we cut off that animal from its family on the other side of the border and we lose it in the United States of America, our children will never see that animal in the wild. Do we only want them to be able to see these wild animals, these beautiful, iconic species in zoos? I don't think so. The opportunity to go out with your family and possibly see a jaguar in the wild or a Mexican wolf in the wild will bring all kinds of new interest to the area, I think, and is an opportunity we can't give up.
Right. So we've been talking about wildlife and conservation in this conversation, but you're also working with groups who are worried about the rights of people living along the border, families, people who may be crossing to visit their families or for business. How do you see the efforts to protect people's rights intersecting with the work that you're doing on wildlife?
Well, again, I don't think you can talk about wildlife dynamics without the communities that surround them. The founder of our organization is Aldo Leopold, and he wrote a really great quote. It says, "A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise." And he always thought about the biotic community including people, right? And the people are just part of that ecosystem. And I think that we need to think in those terms. And you know, the people that live on these landscapes, and they're not our neighbors, they're our families, they're our friends. What is the message that we're sending if we're gonna create this barrier? And I've heard somebody say that we should be creating bridges, not barriers. And I think we need to think in that broader sense. I think it would be wrong for us not as individuals to stand up and respect those communities and our families and friends in that way.
Right. What else are you doing in terms of outreach? Are you asking for help from the federal delegation?
Yeah, we've got all of our pistons are firing at this point on, especially with our membership, and we have connections to all kinds of the people that work within these agencies along the border. And in fact, some of these agencies have actually been receptive to doing things and putting infrastructure along the border that is friendly for the environment, for the species that live down there in the past. So we're hoping they will still be receptive. And Defenders of Wildlife is pulling together all of the science about the wildlife and the environment along the border, and we're going to convene an advisory group, a nonpartisan scientific advisory group that we hope will be able to work with agencies like Homeland Security, Department of Defense, Department of Border Security, so that they can be influenced, we hope, to do the right thing along the border and not build where we know we have critical wildlife corridors and environmental impacts.
All right, Brian Bird, Garrett Veneklausen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.